Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to You've Championed Yourself. Who are you? I'm Chris Ferguson, your host, and it has been a dream of mine to showcase people who have taken their dreams, their ideas, then turned it into their reality. As they reach beyond their personal struggles, their pains, their traumas, so many people give up, they stop, they lose hope. There are a few who can walk through their obstacles, walk past their challenges, and they don't know where it's going to take them. They just trust themselves enough not to give up, to do the follow through in personal life, their career, and in relationships. This is what I call a champion. Today, I have an amazing guest. Her name is AnneAleckson, and she's an amazing individual. She's an energy healer, and she does many, many different things. So let's welcome Anne to the podcast today. Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I am honored and excited that you're here today. It has been such to take the time during the holidays. I appreciate that. And I honor that. And so I just wanted to say that, but I need to do something before we get started so that I don't get phone calls in the middle of all of this. So I just turn everything off. I just shut it off.
All the technology we have to deal
Yes,
with.
yes. But I can, you know what? I'm good with living without it. I'm of that age that, in my 60s, I'm like, okay with it. I'm okay with that. I didn't have it for a long, long time. And I'm okay disconnecting with it.
Yes, absolutely. There's nothing more beautiful and certainly spiritual than to disconnect and take yourself away from all of that busyness and all of those tools and technologies, and there's just so much that you can occupy yourself with. And as you know, I'm sure, the importance of being alone with yourself and your thoughts is it's a great thing.
Well, you get clarity. Most people, once they learn to get beyond the chatter, they can actually get clarity. And so it's so amazing. But today, I want to talk about your backstory. I want to talk about the things that happen in your life that you just at that one moment you said, man, this is not me. This is my past doesn't define me. This is what I want to become. And then how you became it. Do you know that time?
Oh, look, absolutely. There's been a number of times like that. And the very first one really is, I feel like I walked through most of my life. I feel like I was sleepwalking. I didn't, before I had my first couple of awakenings, I didn't really understand that. I didn't really remember a lot of my childhood or anything like that. And it didn't worry me because I didn't know the importance of it and all of those things. But I ended up in my mid-30s and towards my late 30s, I ended up with this sense of dissatisfaction. I had a job. It was a great job, but it was a hard job. It was stressful. I was in a marriage that had been great once, but was no longer. And I was simply biding my time and, doing that routine of getting up in the morning, going to work, coming home at night, having dinner, falling asleep on the couch, waking up hours later and stumbling to bed just to get up the next morning and do the same thing. And a little question popped into my mind, and I don't know where it came from. I like to think that my soul was saying, now's the time. And as it turns out, it was perfect timing, of course. And this question that came to my mind was, why can't I be happy? I just wasn't happy. I was living a life of quiet misery. And I asked that question. And I was having a conversation with someone. I don't even remember who the person was. I know it was a male that I was talking to. And I was having a whinge, as you do, complaining about how crap my life was and how I wasn't happy. And he said to me, Anne, you can choose to be happy. At which point I truly wanted to just simply punch him in the face. Because if I could choose to be happy, why the hell hadn't I been choosing it?
Ooh, good question. Good question.
And how do you choose it? So I, for some reason, decided that I was going to find out how to choose happiness. So I started reading all these books about happiness, and every single one of them, and every teacher I spoke to, and every person that I said, how do you find happiness? Every single one of them, without a doubt, including the Dalai Lama at the happiness, there was a happiness event here, and I went to it, and they talked about happiness. Of course, every single person on stage, including the Dalai Lama, said, meditate. And I thought, well, I've tried that. I can't meditate. I don't know how to. It doesn't work for me. Why can't it work for me? You know, the whole thing. But then years went past, and I'd been trying various ways of meditating, and nothing ever seemed to work for me. I couldn't sit. I couldn't get quiet in my mind. I couldn't, you know, forget what was happening in the body and just allow myself to get quiet. And so suffice to say that many years later, after more of the same, right, even though I knew how to get happy, or at least I'd been told how to get happy, I still continued the life that I'd been living. I made a few changes. I divorced my ex-husband and started, you know, taking responsibility for my life, but not nearly as much as I needed to. I was still expecting some white knight to come in and save me and make me happy, right? And I think that's the fault of fairy tales that we grow up with. But suffice to say that at some point years later, I decided that I was going to start to meditate. I found a way that worked for me, different than anybody else had ever told me, but I found a way. And as I sat and breathed and counted my breaths, I started to hear a voice inside me. I thought it was inside me, but it was also outside of me. It was just the weirdest thing. And that voice, every single time I closed my eyes to meditate, I would hear the same thing over and over. We are all that is, all that was, and all that ever will be, and so are you.
I love that. I love that.
I thought I was going quite mad at that point, as you can imagine. Suffice to say that once I got used to it, once I met some more people in the spiritual arena, because up to that point I'd been in corporate. I didn't really, the most I'd ever done was had my palm read at the market one day. So I was completely away from all of this spiritual and awakening and woo-woo, whatever you want to call it, stuff. So I sought out people who knew what this voice was. I started to move into those arenas and learn of other people who had spiritual awakenings and things like that. And then I started using that. What was happening was I was being downloaded with wisdom from this voice that was inside me, which I called many names, but always knew was all that is. And that's what I've always called it. Other people encouraged me to call it other things because there was a belief in the spiritual field that it had to have a name.
See, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. So I call it my higher spirit is the I am presence.
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm one of those black sheep in everything I do. Okay. I'm just telling you up front. If you say you have to do this, it's like, no, the hell I don't.
Well, listen, I'll tell you something that I don't often admit to. I was so disempowered and so doubtful of my own self that it was easier to just do what everyone outside of me was telling me was what it should be. So there were a lot of rules in the spiritual. There are a lot of rules in the spiritual world, human rules.
Yes.
About
okay.
how you should protect yourself and about how you should, who was in charge of the conversations and all sorts of rules, right? And they all contradicted what I knew inside me. But because I was so, well, that's interesting. That is really interesting, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I was so disempowered and so used to giving my power away that I sought out people who would take my power and tell me what to do. And I did it for a very long period of time. And so that's why I chopped and changed what the name was, because someone would say, oh, I think it's this energy. And so I'd go, oh, that feels nice, because it's all the same thing, right?
Right.
but that wasn't the general belief back then.
Mm-mm.
There was an energy, and it was usually a dead person that was coming in, and da 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 da, and all of these rules and regulations. And I was so disempowered, honestly, that
Mm.
I just did what I was told by whoever was telling me at the time, and which leads into actually the work that I now do, which is all about full empowerment. Now, let me tell you what just happened.
Okay.
I have a chalkboard and it's got a quote on it, and it's the most beautiful quote, and I try to live my life by it. And it was one of the quotes that came to me very early on in my experiences. And it says, I don't have to read it, "First I seek joy and all else follows." And that kind of helped me, guide me through my journey into finding some happiness with myself, which then led me into the work that I'm now doing. So that's an Abraham Hicks quote.
I know that quote. I've actually seen Abraham Hicks in person and went to
Yes,
one
me
of her
too.
seminars. She's an amazing individual. But I
She is.
laugh because when I said I was the rebel, I do it my own way. It's because I've had 3 near-death experiences. I have spoke to the Christ light. I know him personally. We have candid conversations, and they get a little dicey sometimes on my end. And he just sits there and smiles at me and smiles at me. But when I was 4, I drank some liquid Drano because I was hungry and I didn't know. And so they did not know why it didn't burn my esophagus or my intestines, but my body, I was so small that it was just over toxic to my body, and I
Wow.
flatlined. So that was my first one there. And the first time I met him, and he's like, "What are you doing here, my child?" I said, "I don't know. I drank something and I'm here now." And he's like, "Okay, well, I need you to go back. It's not your time." Okay. And in the whole time I'm seeing a being up from the ceiling down, looking down at all these people crying, and somebody's in the bed, but I can't see them or who it is. And it's just peaceful. It's calm. I'm just in my own little world. I don't comprehend much, at 4.
Yeah.
You just kind of that, happy go lucky kid. And then all of a sudden it was like, "Okay, you got to go back now." "Oh, okay. Yeah. But I like it here. It's nice." And then all of a sudden I got palm pumped out of
Wow.
heaven, back into my body. And all of a sudden I'm back in the hospital. I'm in the hospital now, looking up for that entity that was looking down. Couldn't comprehend much, couldn't comprehend all the spirits. It was like Whoopi Goldberg and Ghosts, have all these spirits come up and do us. I'm 4. What are you going to do? Or you're my imaginary friends. Okay. Well, they
Yes.
helped me because at the age of 8, my parents got divorced back in a time where society norms said you can't get divorced.
Yeah.
And I turned 8 in February. I had my first Holy Communion in May, and June 6th, I became an orphan with my other brothers and sisters, and we were all separated.
Oh, wow.
And so it was crazy. So just to give you a background, I'm that street kid. I'm that kid that had no abandonment issues. I had, anger. I had hate. I learned it. I was trying to chase down my mother's car. And when I heard her accelerate and look in the mirror and then shifted it to the higher gear, I literally ran out of my shoes to try to catch her. And I just literally stopped on the asphalt. And at that moment, I knew what hate was.
Wow.
And so I'm that kid. So when I say I'm the black sheep of the family, I don't follow rules. If somebody says, "Well, you're supposed to sit," see, I laughed when you were talking about you couldn't meditate. I'm the last person that can sit there and go, let the whole stuff come in, get out of the thoughts, let it be. Okay. No. I'm the one that puts my earbuds in my ears. I go out and garden.
Yeah.
I go out and feed the animals. I live rurally. So I'm in the middle of Tennessee, have 5 acres, and I'm in heaven. I have woods. You can't see my house from the street, and I can't see the street from my house. So I'm in my own little world now.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, but with that, the second near-death experience I had, I was 15, 16, somewhere around there, and I had lost all hope. I had 2 girls try to murder me in the orphanage, and I took 32 phenobarbital and went to sleep. thinking, okay, I'm done. I'm giving up. I surrender. I give up. I slept for 3 days. Nobody checked on me. Nobody cared anything about me. Woke up and went, holy crap, what's going on here? So I had this conversation with the creator again, going, you know what, I'm done. And he's like, go back, girl, go back. I'm not ready for you yet. I'm like, I'm done. I have nothing to live for. I have nothing I can do to help. I have no meaning to my life. And he goes, no, I'm not done with you yet. And I'm like, got palm pumped right out of there again. I'm like, damn. You know, I'm getting a little thick-headed here because you're doing this so much, you know. I mean, this is just what I was. So that's why when you were talking about meditation, I'm laughing because I do a walking meditation. I do it with rock and roll music blasting, Alice Cooper, Journey. I don't care, you know, Bob Seger, any one of those guys. I'm all about it. But I get such clarity because I'm in the rhythm of the beat. And
Yeah.
that rhythm, that frequency takes me and just gives me clarity of so much. So I was laughing. And the one thing I wanted to ask you about, you talk about super self paradigm. Can you explain that for my listeners and then tell me how you apply it?
So, well, thank you for the question. So, just a little backstory. In those early days, I just received all this information and um, started to clarify what I was doing. And is that a problem for you, that feedback?
I'm not hearing anything here.
Oh, okay, it's just me. All right, then I'll keep going. So I was just working with clients. I was doing energy healing work with them. I was doing channeling. So I'm a direct voice channel, which means that the energy the frequency that streams the knowledge to me actually uses my voice to speak. And in the early days, it was a totally different voice. As anyone who knows channels or has worked with any channels, oftentimes the voice will be different and the expressions. And so that's what it was like for me at the beginning. And I took 10 years where I say that I was apprenticed to source or to all that is, because it was a period of 10 years of solid, just taking the teachings from all that in. Obviously, I was sharing it with others, but mostly it was a focus on me doing the work that I was being taught to teach others. So doing the inner work, releasing this disempowerment that I'd been in my whole life, just becoming more of who I truly was. And the first step of that was to unlearn what I'd learned in my entire life. I mean, everything. Get to a point of nothingness. I know nothing. And then start from there. So it's so the super self paradigm, as I talk about, one of the first things that happened was that I was driving my son to school one morning, and while I thought I'd been writing a book for adults, I started to see images that looked like a children's book, which was kind of weird to me because I didn't want to write a children's book. So I'd been having this for a couple of days, these images that looked like a children's book. And I thought, oh, that's really kind of odd. I wonder what's happening there. I dropped my son at school one day, and as I drove home, I started to hear the words of a children's book that matched the pictures. So I went home and I immediately created this children's book and I published it. It's called My Secret Superhero.
I love that.
Back then, I didn't know the significance of that until about 3 years ago, when I was told by All That Is that I'd finished my 10-year apprenticeship and it was time to teach what I'd been learning. Even though I'd been teaching it as I was learning it, it was a whole different ballgame. So that's when they connected me with this. My secret superhero was the inner superhero, and that my work was all about finding your superpowers and your super self, that version of you that truly is a walking embodiment of source energy.
Mm-hmm.
Source energy in a body, like living 24/7 like that, right? Because yes,
That's a lot of energy to handle.
but it's not when you do the inner work to release everything that you are not, because that's actually who we are.
Right. No, I get that. I get that. But when I channel Christ light, it's like I get body slammed. When I channel Shiva, I get like this energy surge, and I sit up and take notice. That's what I said. That's why it's challenging for
Sure,
me.
sure. Absolutely. It's a lot of energy, but you assimilate with it.
Yes, you
And
do.
that's why the 10 years was important, because from when I first started channeling and people would say, you sound like an old Chinese man or you sound like a Russian lady. These are the two things that people used to say. I no longer I sound like me now when the same thing's happening, because my energy has become at the same frequency as the energy that's coming through me.
Right.
Not all the time, but more often than not. Right. So yeah. So a couple of years ago, when I got to the point where I'd learned everything that I needed to know, I was told that everything that I'm now teaching with the super self work actually was downloaded to me at the same time that I wrote that children's book. And I'd been working with it, but hadn't realized, how it was going to look at the end. And so the super self paradigm is where you literally step into the field of oneness and infinite possibility, where you are completely open to being who you truly are. And sure, we all have human moments, of course. We're human beings. That's the point, right? So it's not, as I said 24/7 before, because that's the ideal, but that's not the norm.
Right.
We make moments where we can tune into and become one with who we really are. And it's very hard to live that way 24/7, because we are human beings and that's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
But it's that field of infinite potential where you can become, and you literally can tap into the knowledge of everything that's ever been, ever will be, and is now. So it's just this place where, I know you're familiar with this place, right?
I am.
Absolutely. It's where you are the embodiment of your Akashic records.
It's that pause that we take in our life and allow us to receive. It's that moment that you realize. For me, it was when my third near-death experience, well, I had cancer. My brother was murdered by a drunk driver. That's when I decided to get into law enforcement, and there was so many injustices. He was never held accountable, and his parents actually helped him get out of it. And I was that kid that said, don't tell me his name. Don't tell me where he lives, because I will avenge my brother's death. So 2 years later, I was a single mom with a 6-month-old child, and I was diagnosed with uterine cancer. Shakes your world. At the time, cancer, the big C back in the early 80s was bad. They didn't have the technology on their side.
Yes.
And so it was like all of a sudden self-worth, all of that judgment came up. But was because the reason why I got into law enforcement was because of my brother. But then as I got into law enforcement, it was about paying it forward. I worked at a police department. I worked at a correctional facility as a correctional officer at a men's prison. I worked gangs on the streets of Miami-Dade and Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale. And then I went to a high school, and this high school had 3,000 students. And these kids either had a foot in the criminal justice system, that they were just about ready to be adjudicated, or they're about ready to be expelled from the school system because they're just that much of a pain and can't follow the rules. And I was there for 15 years. So my 21 years of my 40 years in law enforcement, I spent with troubled youth.
Yeah.
And so I was paying it forward.
Yeah.
So I absolutely understand, but I also wrote a children's book. Didn't know. This is we were talking before we went live about, we have a lot of similarities here we don't even know about, but as we're talking, it's coming up. and I self-published it, and it's called Leave My Bubbles Alone. And it's about bullying, and it's about how bullying starts in the home. And when your brothers or sisters are bullying you in front of their friends, then all of a sudden, and they don't, and then when the friends start bullying you and the sibling doesn't stop it, and then it goes public at school,
Yeah.
all of a sudden it becomes your nightmare. So then
Yeah.
other people and your family member didn't stand up for you, didn't stop it. And so that's where bullying starts. And that's where we say, oh, I can't do anything about it. My own family won't even back me. So it's called Leave My Bubbles Alone. And it's about a little girl who moved into a neighborhood, and her next door neighbor, her and her really good friends and her cousin comes and stays with her over the summer. And that's where all the bullying starts, from the cousin to the friend. And so this little girl didn't know what to do. So she did all the right things. She told somebody, she spoke up, and there was it was just the consequences that usually go with it, or what happens. So when you said that you wrote a book, my heart swelled. And I thought, she doesn't even know. She has no even, that's amazing. I love that, Anne. I love that. And so
it led me to where I am now, which is the grown-up superhero.
but you notice the other thing that we have in common, I have a super cape over here in my logo.
I see, yes.
And it is all about championing yourselves, because, and this is the reason why, is I've seen humanity do so many horrible things to each other. And there's so many people out there that do amazing stuff that never celebrate themselves, never get that chance to have that moment to be able to speak and champion themselves.
Yes.
So that's how this whole thing came about. So I had to wait till I retired from law enforcement, because I couldn't go public. I couldn't have the opinions. They didn't know about my abilities. I mean, when I went to the academy, both correctional and police academy, they were like, we want you to listen to your gut. And I'm like, oh shit, where in the world are hurt? Because they didn't know how much I did. And I lived on that.
I'll tell you things that no one else could possibly know. And then you're going to say, well, hang on a minute, is that something else? And it's not really your gut instinct. It's something even more than that. Yeah. And that's what I love about the work that I do. It's all about activating your inner superhero. Mm-hmm. And your innate abilities, or what I call your superpowers, which are this higher level of intuition, your psychic abilities, your ability to be a lie detector, as we were talking about before. These are all natural abilities, and we get to choose which ones we focus on and allow to come to the fore. And, that's who we truly are. Not just these 6 senses or even 7 senses that we're all familiar with, but there are hundreds of other senses that we have. Mm-hmm. We can astral travel. When I do my healing work, I become one with the person that I'm talking to, and I can feel everything that they can feel. Maybe not to the extent when it comes to physical pain, but I can feel and see their blocks and their reasons for not being who they came here to be, and their wounding and their traumas and all of these things. This is an ability. It's not a special ability to me and you and some other lucky people. It's actually a natural ability that we have. Obviously, it comes with empathy and compassion and all of those things. So that's really my joy, is to activate that inner superhero and the superpowers, and then put people on their purpose path, so that they can start being who they came here to be, because we all came here at this time to change the world, or to save the world like a superhero.
And so, I love that. I'm sitting here, and I'm getting your frequencies, and I'm picking up a lot of stuff, and I'm like, okay. I did warn her that I'm an extreme empath, or did I? I don't think I did.
No, but I expected that you would be.
And but the fact is that I love the fact that it is divine timing. It is. We're exactly where we should be, right here, right now, at this moment. And now that we're in the age of Aquarius, and that's what I love even more about this conversation today, is that we literally, as of the 22nd of December, went full blown age of Aquarius. And they said, well, my husband was like, well, what was the 70s about? I said, they're a bunch of wannabe age of Aquariuses people. because the astrology was the planets hadn't aligned like that. So they just, it was all about this, let's find this euphoric understanding of the age of Aquarius. And so it's taken Pluto and Saturn, or Jupiter and Saturn, 26,000 years to orbit to this moment in this time. And that's how slow moving it is. So we're going to be in this age of Aquarius, which is all about humanity. And that is where my heart of hearts is. Because we, as human beings, instead of being kind and compassionate and empathetic, we're intolerant. We're nasty. We want to divide instead of allow people to have different opinions and respect them for their differences.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Every superhero has an arch enemy. And when we're talking about it as being the inner superhero, then we also have the inner villain. And it's our job to tame that villain, to transform that villain, and be able to, because what we do for ourselves, we do for the whole world. We do for every person. And, we can go out there and we can fight against the tyranny, so to speak, or we can do that within our own selves and stop needing to create it outside so that we can become aware of what's happening inside our own selves. I'm all about the inner work. Everything is my responsibility. Whatever shows up around me, and that's one of the guiding principles of the super self paradigm, is 100% responsibility with no shame or blame.
Yes, or guilt. Or guilt. There's the blame, the shame, and then the guilt comes usually.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that.
The guiding principles of the super self paradigm. We take 100% responsibility. We know that there is never anything going wrong. There couldn't possibly be anything going wrong. So if there's something that I think I should have done that I haven't done, that's false. There is nothing that I should have done that I haven't done, because if I should have done it, I would have done it.
Or, well, I'm a criminal profiler, just so you know. Right. I like to figure out puzzles. But the thing is when you deal with the criminal element, it's about getting something for nothing. It's like they see it as an entitlement. They don't care or even understand or have no compassion for the other human being.
Yes.
It's self-gratification, simply. Yes. So as when we make our choices in our life, we can choose to either do the good side or the bad side. You're absolutely right. We have both inside of us. We have both male and female inside of us.
Yes.
And what the population of the planet has totally forgotten over the last 230,000 years on this planet. And that's not even the beginning of it, but that's when they started demonizing women because they wanted to organize religion to control people. So, and I think you agree with me just by the giggle. So the fact is that, you know what, there was never Eve did not eat the apple in paradise and get everybody's ass kicked out. It didn't happen. It was a story they created to put blame and demonize women. So now that we're in the age of Aquarius, it's like, you know what? I'm a human being first and foremost.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter that I'm female, that did 40 years in a male's dominant career. It doesn't matter that I dealt with kids, breaking up fights, dealing with gang members. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's how I react and respond. And it's like you said, you have to work with your energy compared to your love and your light. And I say you have to harmonize your masculine with your feminine.
Oh, absolutely. That's a big part of what I do when I work with clients. I bring the two together and I call it the divine marriage. The divine inner marriage, and bring the two together. And it's all about balance. It's all about there's neither right nor wrong. There's neither black or white. There is both.
And think of it this way. Let me. I love that. I love that. But I don't use the word balance because in my mind, it's a leveraging system. I harmonize. So if I harmonize your frequencies inside of you, you've got the mind not being left brain, right brain. It's one brain. You get it to be one brain. And then you harmonize it with the heart, which is the feminine.
Yep.
And as you harmonize yourself and understand that it's okay, You don't have to agree with everything. You can go out and be that female cop. You can go out and be that hostage negotiator. You can go out and, I went to the police academy here in Tennessee to get post-certified here in Tennessee. And I was 60 years old at the time. I outran 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. I was the oldest one in the class. We had amazing people in my class. We had amazing people, and they were amazing physical fitness, and that's great. But I wasn't the last one in the pack.
Yeah. Wow.
And so the fact was, that was my goal. That was my vision before I went. However, the fact is that I get premonitions. And this is going to be my question for you after I tell you this little story. I was driving home one day, and all of a sudden I had this vision, and in this vision, it was like a video going past real fast. And it's a little kid. He might be 3 or 4 years old. He's carrying this puppy, and he throws it in the street. And all of a sudden I'm like, what the living Jesus just happened here, So I call my husband. I said, oh my God, I just saw this. And he goes, honey, it's okay. You're on an interstate, you're on a 4-lane highway. You'll be all right. And I was like, yeah, only part of the way. So I'm driving home. I'm white knuckling until we got home. And he's like, see, it was nothing to worry about. We turned the news on. And on the news, a neighbor had recorded their little kid, the next door neighbor's son, who was 4 years old, carrying a puppy and throwing it into the street in front and trying to, there was a car coming, but he didn't understand the timing that it needed to do it. And my husband looked at me like, oh my God.
How did you know that?
So the fact is that I just saw the hate and the harm for beings. So as an empath, how do you I don't want to say turn off, but how do you protect your emotions from all of that? Because in July, I felt all the deaths that were happening on this planet. It was such a horrible moment.
Yeah.
And I didn't tank in my energy. I was just so overwhelmed by the heartbreak.
Yeah.
And within 3 days, I ended up getting COVID.
Yeah.
Now, remind you, I'm working at a school. I'm dealing with special needs kids. I'm dealing with CDC kids with Down syndromes.
Yep.
And there's an amazing little boy. He'd pull my mask down the side and kiss my face and say, oh, I love you, Miss Grass. I love you, Miss Grass. And I say, okay, thank you. But you can't do that. You keep breaking my mask. Don't do that, please. Of course.
Yeah.
And
wow.
He had COVID 3 times. And I didn't know he had COVID. And here he's kissing on my face and touching my face or touching my hair or touching my arm or wanting to hold my hand. And so the fact is that I never had COVID. But in this past July, I felt the planet. And I felt the pain and the suffering people were going through.
Yeah.
So how do you...
Very hard at the moment for anyone who is empathic. Early on in my relationship with all that is one of the very first things that they taught me was to put in conditions. Mm-hmm. If I'm to be here and be on purpose, then this is what I require as the physical being. There's a lot of teachings out there that kind of teach that source or universal energy or all that is, or indeed any non-physical, is a separate energy from us and it has the ability to do with us what it will. Now, I've never had that belief, and that's never been part of my teachings, but it's kind of rife, right? That we are just at the behest of the energy that comes through. That's disempowered empathy, right?
It is.
So it's about powering up or powering up your empathy. And the way to do that is to put boundaries around it, of course.
Hang on one second. Hopefully he did. My husband got it. I'm sorry. I should have put that out of here. So anyway, I apologize.
You know what? Life is what it is, and there's never anything going wrong. So therefore, not even a need to apologize. Boundaries. Boundaries. So in the early beginnings of this, where I was learning all about these things and I was being told the opposite from human beings and than what I was being told by all that is, I wrote a list. If I'm to be on purpose, if I'm to be here on purpose in my full strength doing what I'm here to do, being of service in the way that I'm here to be, these are what the human part needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I listed all of that: income, food, roof over my head, all of that sort of stuff. And obviously part of that is saying, that there is nothing negative that will ever come near me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how my life has been since then, obviously, because I grew up with not quite as dramatic as the things that happened to you, but I had sexual abuse when I was 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a family with a very strong masculine father and 3 brothers who followed him. So, all that patriarchy stuff and things like that, but that, we all have trauma.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of what we're going through right now, and why so many healers are emerging, so many of us are tuning into our healing gifts, is because the way forward is to heal the trauma within our own selves
Mm-hmm.
and in everyone else, because we can't, everyone that you've come across in your police history, they all have trauma that is helping
Mm-hmm.
to create the lives that they're creating and making the choices that they're making. Because we only make the choices that we make from what's inside us. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
holding trauma inside us, we're making over and over and over again the same choices.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the best choices for us. But we don't know any different until we know different. And so I think it's so important that you are putting shows out like this where people are talking about how empowered we can be. Even if just one person sees it, it's been worth it. Do you know what I mean?
I do. In fact, it's funny because my old boss listens to my podcast with the kids at lunch on every Wednesday, because they come out on Wednesdays, the new ones do.
Wow.
And so they have been living this journey with me now that I'm not there. And then I call, she calls me, we talk, and the kids are all there and want to tell me all their stuff. And because of COVID, a lot of the kids that were there in the past have my cell phone number still, because we had to be able to be in touch with them when we were totally remote. And so the fact is they would, help them with their courses and stuff like that. And it was okay. But these kids that I worked with were what they call behavioral kids.
Right.
And they couldn't figure out how I knew what they were doing before they did it. And so it was hysterical. But then when I show up at the football game in uniform, it was like, oh, now we know. Yeah, now we know. Now we know.
Amazing.
So it was hysterical. But the one thing that I found at that time for me is that when this incident happened, when I felt the pain of the planet, I had been sending out healings to the planet for 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. And I do it on my Facebook page every Wednesday night. And then what I do is I
call from 15624446611.
spam. So as I felt all of this, it was to feel the heartbeat of the planet. It was to connect me to not only their pain, but the pain of the earth, about how, human beings are being as unmerciful to the planet as they are to other human beings.
Yeah.
So
and they're doing it because they have inner trauma. So absolutely beautiful. I love that you do that.
And so I do that every Wednesday. And on Sundays, I do mindfulness. And I sit and do mindfulness scripts so that people can get out of their mind. So Monday doesn't get a bad rap as far as, oh my God, here it's Monday again. And they're on Friday and they go, I got to do this, this, and this on Monday. I got to do this. I got to do this. No. Let's stay in the moment. Let's enjoy this moment right here, right now. Monday will be here fast enough, but guess what? If you're not overthinking it, it's going to be a great day. It's as good as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and just as good as Friday.
Yes, absolutely.
So like I said, it's the one thing that you do. You talk about quantum leaping. Can we talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. Because, I believe humans are so capable of so much once they tune into who they truly are. Once they unlearn what they've learned about who they are and who everyone else is and what everything else is. And they come to that place of I know nothing and now I want to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do that, once you start looking at creating your own reality, so making decisions about what your life looks like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we kind of project it into the future. But here's the thing. There's no such thing as time. There's only right now. So if we desire for this future life that we've been trying to create to be present right now, we breathe it into place. We just simply become present in the moment, breathe deeply, ask for anything that would not allow that to be present with you to come up and heal. Here's the thing. We're so damn powerful that we can just ask to be healed, and every single part of us that is in the non-physical, I call it our non-physical aspects because we are the physical manifestation of all that is.
Mm-hmm.
So the non-physical aspects, when you say, you know, like me, you might be down on the bathroom floor wailing and saying, please, God, tell me what I'm here to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had that moment. I call it my eat, pray, love moment. Every single moment that you ask for something that you desire, or you ask for healing, or you ask to be more than you're currently being,
Mm-hmm.
every single aspect of you from the past and the future and right now come into this moment to bring you what you ask for. And of course, what we do, because we're so disempowered, because we don't think we're enough, because we don't love ourselves, we say, oh no, I can't have that. And so
I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to have that.
Absolutely. But it all comes back to what I call unself-love.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, okay, now let's go right into unconditional and self-love. You said the secret word.
Well, I mean, that's really the end goal for me, right? When you come to a place of you've released all your trauma, you're remembering who you truly are, you're realizing that every single time you ask, it is given. That's an absolute truth. Not the way the law of attraction is necessarily taught right now, but it's an absolute truth. When you ask, it is given. When you ask as a human being, all of your non-physical aspects come rushing towards you to give you what you've asked for. And so the only thing that you need is total unconditional self-love.
Yes. Love it. I love the way you're explaining this, because the secret and the law of attraction, they don't teach you this part of the part that they left out. And then everybody gets disassociated or disgruntled or, upset, like, okay, I'm doing what you said and it's not working.
No, but I love that, you see, because what it's done is it's allowed us to have the deeper conversation, which we would never have come to if people didn't already have kind of an idea that there's this thing called the secret where you can ask for things and get them. We can then take the conversation to the next part, which is you got to love yourself first. Otherwise, you won't allow yourself to have what you want. And you won't allow yourself to release your trauma. And you won't allow yourself to activate your inner superhero and your superpowers unless you love yourself. Oftentimes when we're talking, when I'm doing a channeling, I'm doing the expressions that I do, we talk about 3D or the old world and 5D, the new world. And there's this bridge that goes from one to the other. Right at the center of this bridge is a screen door. You know what I mean by that?
I do.
Right? It's got the fly screen in it. And every being, this is where we're at, right? We're all lined up to go through this screen door, but you don't open it. You actually have to screen yourself through it. You have to go through it. And anything that resembles what I call unself-love keeps you stuck there. Until you can release it, you go through it. Now, I call it unself-love because it's really subtle. It's
more palatable than somebody saying they don't want to release their past, or they're creating more of a barrier in their life. I honestly believe that most people who are overthinking it create more harm to themselves than anything they've ever experienced.
And that's the point, right? And so I have this thing that I call it the KISS principle. Keep it simple and spiritual. Because I believe spirituality should be simple. It's not supposed to be this convoluted 26 modules, You know what I mean? It's as simple as letting go of everything that you think you know to be true about yourself, others, and everything else. That's it.
Mhm.
That's the simplicity of it. And so unself-love is
Yeah.
so subtle because, people say, well, the opposite of self-love is self-hate, self-loathing, these sorts of words. But no,
Mhm.
that's actually not it.
That's not even actually correct. It is if you have a negative mindset, you'll have those thoughts.
Yeah, but that's when you're in that, you have that. That's the mindset that you have. But unself-love is just so subtle. In other words, what I'm saying is that it's so subtle that you don't even know that you're doing it, because in any moment that you think you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, that's a moment of unself-love.
See,
Because
I see
love,
that as a lack of
you can't
integrity.
get it wrong.
Yeah, I see that as a lack of integrity, a self-integrity, because that's a choice. Because ordinarily we're here to love
But
and
is
be
it a choice,
loved.
though, for some people? It's not. For me, I see it as a trauma response. Now, for me, trauma is very subjective. It can be something
Mm,
teeny, or it can be something huge. I have worked with a client who, in the healing work that we were doing, had a memory of being left to cry in her cot. Her mother was doing controlled crying. Her mother was outside the door, probably crying as well, we think. But in that moment, that tiny little baby version of her decided that that must mean she wasn't enough.
mm,
And she carried that through her whole life. So she wasn't even aware that
mhm,
she was carrying this unself love, really. Because if you loved yourself, you know you are enough. So I often say, if you loved yourself, what would you do from that? What
mhm.
choice would you make? But most people are making their choices from a version of themselves that was created through trauma.
Well, it's either trauma or it's resistance. And so
But
there's
doesn't
sometimes
resistance
resistance
come
in
from
your
trauma?
there is a lot of resistance because the thing is there's I've had a client that wasn't allowed to do what they wanted to do, and that because of that resistance they were disciplined. They saw the
Yeah.
discipline as trauma, even though the discipline wasn't the trauma. It was their resistance
The
to take it time to do
discipline
it.
was their response to the trauma.
Yes,
We're talking the same thing, just different
we
words.
actually are. It's just the way you look at it. It's that
Yeah.
perception.
Mm.
And being two different types of energy healers here, I love the fact that, I see it instead of unlove, I see it as being unconditionally loving. Because if I can forgive the man that murdered my brother while he was drunk driving, I don't dismiss his bad behaviors,
Yes, absolutely.
but I don't have that hate for him. I don't have that anger for him. I don't have those. I have different choices about how, if I ever met him, how I would react.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
it has, so that's why I call it unconditional love, because
Well,
when you have unconditional love for yourself, it starts here.
exactly. And that's again exactly what I'm talking about. I
Mhm.
actually use the word unconditionality. Instead of unconditional love, I call it unconditionality.
Mhm.
But it's the same thing.
It is. It
When
is.
you're unconditional, you have no conditions on how anyone needs to show up
Mhm.
around you.
No expectations, no
Again, you
anticipations.
can't be
Yeah.
in that place until you've healed any moments of
Mhm.
trauma that you've had. Again, trauma being subjective. Again, you could have something tiny that wouldn't affect anyone else, or you can have something huge that doesn't affect you as much as it does someone else who had the same type of trauma. Because
Right.
trauma is totally subjective. What happens is we revert back to uh, there's two aspects of it. When we have a moment of hurt or trauma, we first of all we have a feeling about it, so we feel angry or sad or whatever the feeling is, or we're afraid, and we pull the energy of that feeling inside because we don't want to feel it. So we suppress it. And
Mhm.
then secondarily, we make a decision about ourselves based on how we're feeling and what the situation is. So we make that decision that I mustn't be enough. And we pull the energy of that inside as well. And we create all of these, what I call inner aspects, or more commonly known as inner child. But we've got hundreds of thousands of them within ourselves with every moment of trauma. And I've come across people whose moment of trauma was when their mum said no to them.
Yes. I absolutely agree. It's not that I am not empathetic to that, but when you get palm pumped out of heaven by God, your creator, being told no, in my understanding, is not a trauma.
No.
I'm sorry you're going through it. I understand that you don't like this, but now let's talk about your responsibility and accountability. And that's how I would go from there.
When you're a child, between the ages of 1 and 8, 9, 10, 11, they say, you don't have the capacity to think like that. So you just make it all about yourself and what's wrong with you.
Well, usually a lot of times what people do is they take on the pain, like maybe if I was a better kid, if I didn't do this, or if I didn't get in trouble.
In other words, I'm not enough.
Yes. To internalize this, or to think that if they would have done something different, it could change the outcome, which we all know. But the same understanding is that we also take on the guilt, blame, and shame, because for those of us that have been molested or raped or beat up or whatever traumas that happened in our lives, at a time society says, well, if you didn't dress that way, it wouldn't have happened. Or if you didn't look that way, it didn't happen. And so you get all of that stereotype going on. So that gets compounded. So it's like, everybody just wants to belong.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And because we're so self-focused, everything becomes my fault.
Exactly.
Until we get to an age where we can kind of use our mind to change that.
That's where I became the black sheep. I'm just saying. That's what.
Absolutely. Love the black sheep. Absolutely. Perfect age for all the black sheep.
One of my last questions for you is, and I ask this of everybody I interview, if you were to go and talk to your 5-year-old self, what would they tell you?
What would they tell me?
About who you are today?
Oh my gosh. Wow. What an amazing question. Wow. Right now I'm feeling that version of myself inside me, just kind of looking up in wonder and awe.
And saying, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for taking the courage and the power to step forward.
Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling from you, because so many times in our lives, we feel like quitting and we don't know what that push is. And it's literally our inner child saying, don't give up. Don't quit.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I've got dreams. Live them.
Yes.
Wow. That's a fantastic question. Best question I've ever been asked.
Oh, I see. I love it because I stay in touch with my inner child. I used my parents as the example of what not to do in life. And if I thought they were going forward, I'm taking a hard left or a hard right. And that's how I have been successful in my life. And so that's been my guiding principle. Like, okay, what would they do? Okay, boom, we're gone. I don't know which way is right. I don't know which way is wrong. It doesn't matter. It's just, it's not that way. So it can't be. Either way I go, it's just whatever I make.
Black sheep. So black sheep.
I am. And I'm very blatant and honest, but then the fact is I'm front and vulnerable. And that was, being vulnerable wasn't the hardest thing to be, was not being ashamed of where I grew up, because I was one of those kids.
Yeah.
And I was a delinquent just because I was one of those kids.
Yeah.
There was all the labels, all the pointing of fingers. And I'm glad we're finally getting to an age to say, you know what? I didn't choose this. I didn't choose that. This is what I had to survive. And so going forward in that's why I always love working with kids, because when you can help kids graduate from high school and set that foundation where they didn't have that support system before. And it's not that mom and dad didn't love them. It's just that mom and dad are in a different country, because it was so transient down in South Florida. and mom and dad are working and grandma's supposed to be watching the kids and she's in her 80s. She can't watch teenagers.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to my friend's house. I'm going to a friend's house. And then the next thing she knows, the police are calling. He's been arrested.
Yeah.
So the fact is, you know, they do whatever they can get away with at that age. So that's why I'm glad that under 18, they're not held responsible and they're given opportunities to change their ways. But when you hit 18 and you don't choose to change your ways, I see it a little bit different because we are so forgiving in this country with kids. And I don't think we should change the worlds to suit our children. I think we should build our children up so that they can handle the world no matter what comes to them, because that's how you empower somebody. You don't disable them and expect them to think that there's going to be roses and unicorns and butterflies everywhere they go.
Not until they've dealt with their own trauma.
Well, not only that, but the fact is let's not lie to them. Let's be honest and upfront and forward with them.
Yeah.
Let's have those conversations with them and saying, you know, you as a female, let's talk about being a female. Females have been demonized for 250,000 years. And so you automatically, it doesn't matter what color you are or what race you are, you're automatically have three strikes against you. And the only thing that they can see you, that you're good for is having children. So, you know, with that understanding, it's like, okay, come on, let's 2022. We're right on the cusp of 2022. How about we see individuals?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Hang on one second. It takes a special kind of individual to dream their dreams, their thoughts and ideas, and turn it into the reality. Anne has done that. She stepped past her fear. She stayed the course and had the courage to go through the follow through to the end. Anne, you have championed yourself. Now we know who you've become. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and your dreams with us today and your time.